I just want to start by saying thanks to Lorna and Ian and Janet and everyone that's been involved in this campaign so far because it's so important. Everyone knows that workplace sexual harassment continues to affect millions of workers worldwide. And it's an issue that's constantly raised and mentioned by trade unions, professional bodies, and whistleblowers themselves. But it seems that very little changes. And I'll just talk a little bit about what's happening in the UK. And I'm looking forward to hearing from our international friends about their work shortly. But in the UK, a report was commissioned by the campaign by researchers from Sheffield, Hallam, and Staffordshire universities. And they found that workplace sexual harassment is affecting 1/3 or more UK workers every year. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because as we know, a lot of workers don't report these incidents. So we think that the figure's likely to be far higher than that. Yet despite this prevalence, there's actually been a lack of government research into the full extent of workplace sexual harassment. The previous government only committed to collecting data in 2018. And of course, as I've said, any such data downplays the true extent of the issue, given that we know so many people are not likely to come forward. Now, workplace sexual harassment can be experienced by anyone, but the available data from the UK generally supports the anecdotal evidence that it's largely perpetrated by men against women, while other groups such as LGBT workers, young workers, and those from non-white ethnic minorities are also at higher risk. And of course, low-paid, insecure workers are also, unsurprisingly, some of the most vulnerable to this. But just like the changes against sexual harassment perpetrators don't often stick, neither are the preventative legislative solutions applied in the UK having enough of an impact to stop it happening in the first place. We've got legal requirements placed on employers at the moment, but they often end up being a tick box exercise where employers implement the bare minimum that they can get away with whilst not doing anything to address toxic workplace cultures and mindsets more generally. Now, the End Not Defend campaign was launched in Westminster in January this year, and the campaign organised by the Workers' Policy Project in Sheffield Hallam University brings together activists, policymakers and trade union leaders to advocate for stronger legal protections against sexual harassment in the workplace. The Bakers Union have been heavily involved with this, and I'm speaking as their parliamentary group chair. We've put a number of early day motions down on this issue, and we're looking to do much more within Parliament to press the government to take stronger action on this. And the campaign's taken quite a clear approach. And as we've heard, very articulately from Lorna, it's more than just a HR issue. It's actually a health and safety crisis. And that's an important distinction to make, really, because it's the difference between shifting employers' mindsets from just fulfilling their minimum legal requirements just to protect their businesses versus meaningful protections for workers that actually have legal teeth. Now, employers must, in my view, be held accountable for protecting workers, and that system has to prioritise the needs of victims over compliance checkboxes. So the campaign is calling for changes in the law to ensure that business accountability and for health and safety executive, the HSE as it's called in the UK, to be included in addressing workplace harassment. And as we've heard from Lorna, there's a few key asks that we're making of government. Firstly, it's mandating accountability by strengthening employer measures to prevent harassment in the workplace. It's secondly, by bringing workplace harassment under the health and safety executive's remit so that employers can be investigated by the HSE. Now, there's a huge issue that me and Janet constantly talk about resourcing of the HSE. Is dramatically under-resourced, even just to investigate standard health and safety issues at the moment. So alongside this requirement for it to bring the sexual harassment under its remit, we also need to see funding so that we can see more regular inspections and workplace policies are analysed on a regular basis. And then thirdly, it's about empowering employees, providing clear, safe pathways for reporting harassment, protecting employees from retaliation when they come forward, and increasing time limitations on reporting sexual harassment grievances. The key really is to prioritise victims over perpetrators and to find easy ways for victims to be able to report, whether it's either anonymously or not anonymously. We need to give them the security and the confidence to be able to do that. Now, the campaign's proposing some very groundbreaking, fresh solutions, but it's also important to note what they're looking at doing is scaffolding off current UK legislation too. So, for example, we've already got a framework that was started in 2013 for the reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrences regulations, RIDDOR as it's called, and we can add sexual harassment to that for the reporting of anonymous reporting systems. The framework's already there, so it's not as if we need to start from scratch. It's going to be an easy shift to make, and it'd allow victims to report harassment confidentially, and it would remove the fear of retaliation and create that safe pathway. Now, we've already started looking at ways that we can get some of these changes into UK law. As I said, we've suggested amendments and early day motions within Parliament, which are basically kind of documents that MPs from across the House support just to show the strength of feeling on a particular issue. What we also tried to do when the Employment Rights Bill was going through Parliament was to table amendments to that so that we got that added to the government's new groundbreaking trade union and employment legislation. But unfortunately, they didn't get through this time. Only so many were picked for votes. So we didn't get the opportunity to vote on them. But we're looking out at the moment for every possible piece of legislation that we can crowbar this into. And it might be in the next Parliament that we'll have such a piece of legislation that we can do that. And then obviously there's also the opportunity for private members' bills as well. To try and take that forward, and a number of colleagues are trying to find ways to bring that to the fore. But in the meantime, I think what campaigners are doing, they're doing a fantastic job, and tonight's a good example of that. The campaigners themselves and the affiliate trade unions are trying to build momentum around the campaign. It's trying to get MPs like me interested and supporting it, but it's also making the general public aware of what's happening and make sure that those people who are in workplaces who have suffered harassment know that people are fighting for them and that we're trying to change things so that they don't have to go through what they've been going through anymore. And I think there's also a discussion to be had about where we take the campaign next, really. And that's how both parliamentarians, but also trade union representatives themselves can be working on getting employers on board, like Lorna's just described with the fantastic agreements that she's got with the employers that she mentioned. But how do we get into those workplaces who don't have trade union representation? And how do we start building up momentum on that? And I think that's something that campaigners, hopefully with the help of MPs and trade unions, trade unionists will take forward in the coming months. Well, returning to the event today, I'm really interested to hear about some examples of best practice from around the world. We've got some fantastic speakers to come, and I'm looking forward to sharing information about what's working so that we can get further new ideas for what we can look at and get implemented here in the UK. And I'd like to thank all of the speakers that are speaking today, because especially Claire, who I think has come from Australia at 3:30 in the morning. I'm tired and it's only 7:30 at night in the UK. So thanks so much, Christian and Claire, for speaking to us about the international picture here, because we know that the prevalence of workplace sexual harassment is a huge systemic failure globally. It's proved hugely persistent and resilient to so much that's been tried already. But I think through the work of the End Not Defend campaign, we can be bold and creative, and we can be persistent until we finally ended the meaningless culture of tick boxes and actually start seeing meaningful results. Thank you very much for having me.